everybody, my name is Tal. I work at GitBook, and today we're going to set up a doc site with GitBook that contains both product docs and auto-updating API docs. So if you're not familiar, GitBook is a managed docs platform that makes it easy to write, edit, collaborate on, and publish your product documentation. And this can include everything from basic product docs, how-to guides, tutorials, and then those auto-generated API docs. So as an example, this is GitBook's documentation. So this is GitBook's documentation about how to use GitBook, which is hosted on GitBook. And you can see we have all these different kinds of pages and sections. And then we also have our API reference over here. And so this is all auto-generated. And today we're going to walk through how you can quickly and easily get this set up. So we're going to do a few different things. So I have a repo all set up already. This has basically the backend for GitBook. So you can clone this repo and you can just quickly get started with the docs. The really nice thing about GitBook is that we have both an editor as well as sync with Git, so that for folks who might be product experts, but they're not as comfortable with the Git workflow, they can use our editor. And I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. And then for folks, engineers, people who are a bit more technical, who prefer to use a Git back workflow, they can just clone a repo and push commits. And it's actually a bidirectional sync. And so changes that are made in the editor will propagate to the repo, changes made in the repo will propagate to the editor. And so everybody can collaborate in the way that they see best. So first steps here are, I believe this link will be included in the description. So you go to the repo, and if you just fork the repo, that'll be the first step. And then we're going to work off of that. So I'm not going to fork the repo. This is in my org, but I'm going to show you how that works. And then you can actually see these steps right in the repo as well. So you'll fork the repo. You're going to sign up for GitBook. So let's go take a look at that right now. And so if you go here, well, let me go back and open this up over here. You're going to go through the process after you sign up for GitBook of creating an organization. So an organization is how you're going to collaborate with your team on your different documentation projects. So this is like, you'll be able to invite team members and you'll be able to set up permissions who should be able to merge and review and write docs for your org. And after you sign up for GitBook, let me just show you in a new window how that will look. No, maybe this is not the best example. Here we go. So if you go to app.gitbook.com/join, and there is a link in the repo, and you click on sign up, you'll be able to sign up either with just an email address, or you can use GitHub or Google authentication. And once you do that, you'll be prompted to name your organization. Again, organization is how you'll collaborate, and it's also going to be the name of, it's going to give you the URL, the default URL for your doc site. So when you name that, just pay attention to what you're naming it. You want to name it something that will be descriptive. Okay, and then once you do that, you'll be prompted to create your first GitBook site. So GitBook site is just your documentation site. It's where your documentation is hosted. And you have a few different options to get started. And like I mentioned before, we're going to be starting with this sync with Git. So we're going to use Git sync with this GitHub repo. I'm going to click into here. And I didn't mention this before. When you fork that repo, you're probably going to want to fork it into a personal repo instead of like a company one, just for the purposes of this tutorial. That'll just make sure that the permissions are nice and easy, because you will need permissions on the repo in order to set up your Git sync. And so, okay, so click into here. I'm going to click now this GitHub sync, go to next step. I'm going to go through this authentication process with GitHub. Authorize gitbook.com. And now it's prompting me to select my account. So I'm going to go, this repo is in gitbook.io. And I'm going to, this is the API Days Paris 2025 repo. And I'm going to select the main branch over here. And I'm actually going to use this possibility here of using a monorepo. So if you look at the repo here, I actually have two different docs sites set up here, two different doc spaces, and we're going to be using this docs before example. And so when you set up Git sync with your repo, you can set up just a standalone repo of just your docs. But if you want to have other stuff in there as well, like I have API specs in here, you're going to point it directly at the repo, at the directory within the repo. So I'm going to use this docs dash before subdirectory. All right, we'll scroll down here. And then the next important thing here is we're going to set up the initial sync. So in our case, we have all of our content in GitHub and we want to sync that to GitBook. Sometimes you might do it the other way around. You might get started with your site on GitBook in the editor here, and you might want to sync it the other way. So just double check that you're doing this the right way so that you don't lose your content and it goes in the direction that you'd like it to go. So we're going GitHub to GitBook and we're going to press sync over here. Now, this is going to take just a couple of minutes. It's going to walk through the steps over here. You can see it's pretty fast. And if we go to view space, we're in the GitBook editor. So this is the backend. And we can see all of the content that we've cloned from our repo. And so we can click into these different pages. And we see here, this is right now, we have a page set up for the API docs, but we haven't actually set up the API yet. Okay, so if you look in this sidebar, this is going to show us our site and then our space. So the space is where our content lives within our site, and then the site is the site itself that we're going to publish. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to press this publish button. And yeah, right, published, ready to go live. We're going to start a trial. GitBook does have a whole bunch of different plans. So we have a free plan for both like individual users. We have a free plan for open source projects, a whole bunch of different paid plans all the way up through enterprise. So this is going to start us on a paid plan, but we can always downgrade. And this is going to give us the link to our site that we just published. So let's open that up. And so this is a public site. Anyone can go here. It's Evolve Payments API Days. This is the organization that I had created and slash our doc site name. And again, we can click through here. This is a fictional example, by the way. Evolve Payments is a fictional payments provider that we've created for the example over here. And you'll see we have just all these different pages that we've started with. Okay, so we've created a doc site. We've cloned it from a repo. We've also published the doc site. Let's go back now and let's take a look at just editing our doc site. So the nice thing is if you're logged in, this is public facing, but you'll actually see this nice little menu on the bottom that you can click into to edit in GitBook. So that's visitors to your site are not going to see that unless they are logged in and able to edit. So if we click in here right now, you'll see this is the content, but we can't edit this right in this window over here. We're going to click the edit button. And what that's going to do is it's going to create something called a change request, which is basically like GitBook's version of a branch or a pull request. And this lets you version control your docs, and it lets you, even users who might not be as comfortable with Git workflows, they can version control their docs as well. You can make edits, and then you can actually request reviews from your teammates and merge them in easily. So what we're going to do, maybe we can, let's create a new block. If you type slash, you'll get a whole big list of all the blocks you have available. So we can do like these quote blocks. Here's another quote. And then you can create like a table if you wanted with some content. And you'll see there's just a whole bunch of different blocks in here. And then another thing we're going to do before we merge this in is we're going to first set up our API spec. So if you go back to that repo, you'll see we have this API specs subdirectory. And within there, we have two API specs. So these are OpenAPI specifications in YAML format. Click into one of these. So these are kind of long, but if you're familiar with OpenAPI specs, these should look fairly familiar. I'll go into this in a bit more detail a bit later. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy the link to the raw file. So copy the link address. And we're going to go, well, let's set aside this change request for the moment. So we're going to go out of the change request, and we're going to go to this OpenAPI menu in the sidebar. And you'll see we'll go here to this generate API docs automatically. You'll see this window, and we're going to click add specification. And over here, you're able to put in, enter your URL to your API spec wherever it's hosted. And so we have the link that we took from before, and I'm going to call this, this is a pretty reasonable name. So this is how we're going to identify this within our list of API specs. I'm going to press add. And now this will take a couple of minutes to process. And yeah, there we go. Also pretty fast. This isn't a particularly long API spec. And you can see the rendered version of this API spec over here. And what this does is now our docs, when we add the API spec to our docs, it's going to be linked and live updating. So we call this computed content. Instead of it being a static piece of content within the GitBook docs, as this API spec gets updated in the repo, it's also going to update in our docs. Okay, so we have this here right now. Let's go back to our space, and let's actually go back to our change requests. So we click back in here, and we're going to click into our change requests menu over here. And this is going to be the one that we had opened just a couple of minutes ago. And we can actually see in this overview, like some of the changes so far. So we had added the quote block, and we added that table. If we go back to our editor, let's add an API block. And I'll show you two different ways that you can incorporate OpenAPI specs auto-rendered into your docs. So I'm going to delete these. I had these before, and they didn't work because I didn't have things set up. And I'm going to click that slash menu to see my available blocks again. But instead of searching for a table or quote, now I'm going to search for OpenAPI or API. Oh. That's strange. Here we go. Yeah, I think I was within another block when I did that. And so it was the OpenAPI spec wasn't an option within that block. But if you click just at the top or fully into a block by itself, you'll be able to find OpenAPI. And you'll see here, it's giving me the option to select the specification that I want to use because it is possible to have more than one. I'm going to select the one that I had earlier and click continue. And now you'll see here, it's giving me the option to insert one or more OpenAPI blocks based on the OpenAPI spec that I have. So let's add maybe this /payments block, and we'll add this /payments/ID. So we have the create payment and we have get payment. So creating and retrieving payments. And then we also have the option to include schemas from the API spec as well. So let me add the payment schema there too. And if I press insert blocks, you'll see now these are added to our page. And so we have both the get and the create payment blocks. We also have this payment specification that just shows us all the different attributes and some information about them, child attributes. And so like I mentioned before, the nice thing about this is these are linked to our repo, so to the API spec within that GitHub repo that I showed you before. And so as we update the spec in our repo, it's going to update these here as well. You also get a whole bunch of things out of the box with that. So you can see we have all the different code snippets for different ways of like making the requests to the endpoint. JavaScript, Python. And we haven't configured it here, but I'll show you in the published version, you can actually set things up to test the endpoints as well, right from your docs. So, okay, if you recall, we're in a change request. So we're making some edits. Let's merge this in right now. So press the merge button. If we were collaborating with teammates, we might request the review before we do that. And now we can see we have this on our page. And now if we go back to our site and click on visit again, we go to our Evolve Payments API page. And you can see now on our published site, we have the API specs that we've just added. So this is one way of doing it, but let me show you another way if you want to add like a whole section within your docs for your API spec. So we're going to go back to the space that we're working in, and we're going to click Edit again to open a new change request. And now, instead of selecting a page and adding API specs there, we're going to click on this Add New button in our sidebar. And you'll see we have this OpenAPI reference over here. So we'll click onto that. And again, go through this process of selecting the specification. And here you'll see we have a couple of different options. So we can include a model reference page. So this was like where we selected the schema for payments before. This gives us that. And we also have the option to include a download link, which this can be really handy for, I don't know, if you have a more technical product and you want to give users the option of actually seeing the specification for your API. So we'll include that here as well. If you press Insert, you'll see we get a bunch of pages, and they have these like little lightning bolt symbols. Again, these indicate that this is computed content. So this is going to be auto-updating based on that spec. And if we click into here, you'll see this first page is just a description that comes from the API spec, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And then our payments and customers pages, these are going to be where we actually have our endpoints. And so you can see, you can scroll through here. And then our models page, this is the actual schemas for the different models we have. And then if we click this download OpenAPI spec button, it's actually going to open a window where we can download the spec. Okay, so we have added a spec. We've seen a couple of different ways that we can do that. If we merge this in now, you'll see it will update our page. Let's take a look at actually customizing things a bit more. So first of all, let's customize our doc site. So by default, it's not super interesting. It's a little, I don't know, it's fine. You get something which is quite nice, but we might want to make this match our brand guidelines a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to go click into our site, and you'll see we have a couple of different options here. So if you click into customization, this is going to give you all of the different aesthetic decisions that you can make. So you can update your icons over here. And if you go to the repo, you'll see that we actually have some icons available, favicon and these dark mode and light mode icons over here. So I can download those and upload those into the site. Close this. And then we can also update just the overall theme for the site. So right now we default to the clean theme, but we're going to click on the gradient theme here instead. This is going to be just like a subtle, nice, slight difference. And we're going to update this primary color and make it something that's a bit more in line with our product. So I'm actually going to use the eyedropper and get this nice pink. Apply it there, and you can see here, it doesn't change the background because you still want it to look nice and streamlined, but you'll see that the text color changes. And you'll start to get at like little bits of color that will match your theme. You can add this tint color as well. And then we can also set the default mode to be light or dark mode. I personally like to do the toggle whenever possible, just because this is something where people have very strong preferences, and it's going to give us this light and dark mode button. And then you can even change your font over here. You can add a custom font. Let's change it to I don't know, Open Sans. And we can change the styling of icons if you wanted. And then maybe you want this sidebar to be like a little bit more called out. So you can set up this filled sidebar, and it's a little subtle here, but it's going to create this like tray that the sidebar sits on. And I'm going to add a line so you can actually see more clearly which page we're on. And so if I click on save over here, this is going to automatically just update our site. And again, if we visit our site, this might take just a minute. Yeah, maybe let me come back, because sometimes this takes a minute or two for the cache to clear. But come back to that a little later. In the meantime, let me show you let me show you one other thing before I do that. Let's go into our settings. And in our settings, you're going to see you can rename your site over here. So this is going to actually update how the site's name is shown. And then you can also, if you wanted to, you can update your audience to make the site public or authenticated access only, which puts this behind an authentication screen. You can also change the slug. So like I mentioned before, the default URL in Gitbook is going to be your organization name.gitbook.io, and then it's going to be slash whatever set here. So I can set this to be, I don't know, my site if I wanted. I'm not going to do that because it's going to just break what I've just created, but you do have that option. You can set up redirects, change a whole bunch of things right over here. We also let you customize your search experience. So I'll show you this in just a couple of minutes, but we have these different search options, including an assistant, which lets you have conversations with your docs. And you can add even your own suggested questions there. And then if you wanted to, you can actually embed that search, that assistant to have conversations with your docs. You can embed that in your own site so that within your product, you can have a little chat window where users can talk to your docs whenever they have questions. Okay, let me jump over and just show you how we can customize that OpenAPI spec a bit more in ways that are even specific to your Gitbook docs. So right over here, I have my OpenAPI spec. So this is just, I'm using VS Code. This is where I have the file, where I have the repo cloned locally. And this is the OpenAPI spec. And so I have some stuff commented out that I'm going to comment in, and I'll talk you through as I go. So within the description right now, if you remember, let's see, let's go back to the site. So you see here now that our changes have propagated. So we have this tray and we have this line. When we changed the color, we had only done it for light mode. And so let's switch to light mode right now. And so we have this was our first page. This was the page that comes from our, it was auto-generated by our OpenAPI spec. And so this is just the description that you get right over here. And the nice thing about this, I'm going to remove this description right now. And I'm going to comment in this description. Because Gitbook is built off of Markdown files, you can embed any of the Gitbook blocks. All of the Gitbook blocks can basically be expressed in Markdown, and you can embed any of those within the description over here. So I'm going to save this, and you'll see that these are all Gitbook blocks. This is a stepper block, which shows you some instructions. We have tabs. We have things like titles and all sorts of different types of blocks, a hint. And we can actually put these right in our OpenAPI spec, and Gitbook will know how to interpret them. Now, the next change we're going to make is we're going to add icons and page titles to our page. And so what this does is instead of just defaulting to the default for the tag, which is how the pages are created right now, payments, I'm going to give this the title Payments API v3, and I'm going to give it a page icon. These page icons come from Font Awesome, so you can basically use any of the icons that are available there. So we're going to comment this in. I'll show you this in a minute. The next thing we're going to do for our currency attribute, we have an enum. These are the three different kinds of currency. We have USD, euros, and pounds. And we're going to give these enum descriptions. And that way, when a user mouses over these, they're going to see, they might not know what these stand for, but when they mouse over, they'll get to see the full wording for what it stands for. Scroll down a bit more. I showed you before that you get those code samples right out of the box. So you get, I think, Perl and HTTP and JavaScript and Python. So these are just the different ways that you can make requests. But if you use this Xcode samples property, you can actually specify your own code samples. And so when we do this, we're going to update our Python and JavaScript ones. The JavaScript one we're going to label as Node, and we're actually going to add a Ruby example here also. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to mark the stability. So maybe this refunds endpoint, maybe that's an experimental endpoint, and we want to make sure that users are aware of that, that they might want to not totally rely on this, that it can change, and so we can mark the stability there as experimental. And then I mentioned before, we have the try it panel. Maybe this get customers, this is something where we also want users to be a bit more careful. So we're going to hide the try it panel because we don't want users to be able to test it directly from our site. Okay, so I mentioned before, our docs are going to be syncing directly with that repo. And so I'm going to push the change now. So let me check. I've updated this API spec. So let's add this. And push. I have git sync set up. Let me just push this again. And let's go back and let's see what's happened over here. So if we look at this, you'll see that our docs, our API spec, this has just been updated. And GitBook isn't looking for an updated spec all the time, but by default, it's going to look every 6 hours to see if your spec has been refreshed. But you can also just click this button and check for updates. So click this. This may just take a minute. And you'll see we had updated that description, and you can see that updated description here now. So let's go back to our site now. Let's refresh this page. And we just have to go back. Here we go. So this right here, all of this content is from our API spec. So all of these more advanced types of GitBook blocks, like the stepper block with the different steps, we have columns, we have this hint block over here. All of these are come from our OpenAPI spec right over here. So this description at the top. So as we update this and we push the changes, our docs are going to update as well. Let's look at some of those other changes. So if you recall, these tags were just called payments and customers, but I wanted to give these a more descriptive name. So we're able to maintain the tag name, payments, while also changing the sidebar description name over here. And we're also able to give it, these are the font awesome icons that I had mentioned. And then if we scroll, I think I had the currency. So if we mouse over these now, if we hover, we're going to see those enum descriptions that we had set up. You'll see here, this refund a payment is now marked as experimental. And I know I hid one of these tested buttons also. I have to figure out which one I hid, but you get the idea. And yeah, if we click into models, you can still see our models are here. And so this API documentation is now going to automatically update whenever this API documentation updates, whenever the API spec updates. And the nice thing is, in this particular example, I have the API spec in the same repo where I also have the docs and everything saved. But this can be anywhere. So my engineering team can own the OpenAPI spec. It can live in a repo someplace totally different. My docs team might own the docs, and that will live over here. And so just you get these seamless automatic updates without needing to wait and do all these different processes to update the docs. It's just easy. So let me go through, I can show you now an example. This is like the finished version. This is the after of the docs. There's a link also in the repo at the bottom. So if we go to the home of this. Yeah, so we have the starting doc set and the finished one. And you see here we have, I've turned off the download, but we have icons for the basic description. We have an icon for the actual page itself. Yeah, well, the models over here. This is on dark mode. I've set up the colors to be a little bit nicer. And so by playing around, you get a whole bunch of really nice things where you can, I don't know, it's been what, 20, 25 minutes? I have a decent looking doc site in not too long with automatically updating API documentation. The last thing I'm going to show you is our GitBook Assistant. So if you click this little button, you can do your search over here and ask questions, but you can also have a conversation with your docs. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to say, what payments endpoints are available with Evolve payments? And with this, it's going to search through our whole doc site, but including our API docs. And it's going to tell me, hey, these are the endpoints that you have available. You have post, you have get, you have this other post for refunds, and I can say, okay, tell me how to use the create payments endpoint. So yeah, it walks you through what it's doing. It's like any other LLM, but it's already embedded in your product, which is just so nice. It's going to pull out the code snippet for me. It's going to give me the header that I need to use in the body and any optional attributes. And so this is just, again, it's really very easy to get up and running with just some content, an OpenAPI spec, a GitHub repo, and then the GitBook Assistant. So that's all I have now for today. Again, you can fork the repo over here. This QR code is here. There should be a link in the description to this video as well. And thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. One last thing that I'll tease here is, well, if you go into your GitBook space, we have a new feature called the GitBook agent, which also helps you write and make changes to your docs. So you can open up a change request, and you can say things like, I'm going to click on the agent, and I can say things like, can you please do a grammar check? Yeah, I'm still somebody who says please to LLMs. I just can't break myself of the habit, but can you please do a grammar check across the start guide? And what this is going to do is it's actually going to make changes directly in this change request or open up a new change request. And it's going to search through all the pages. You can use this to check for consistency of language across your different pages. You can do this to make changes based off of specific knowledge. We're working on some really cool stuff here, so keep an eye on it, check it out. And yeah, thanks again for taking the time and working on docs with me. And I wish you a lot of luck with putting together your own really nice doc site. Thanks.